They found ancient messages about Earth. All said the same thing: never wake them. When humanity finally developed faster-than-light travel, they expected to find a thriving galactic civilization. Instead, they found ruins, millions of dead worlds, their cities turned to dust, their histories wiped clean. But across these ancient planets, carved into monoliths, etched into bunker walls, and transmitted in looping distress signals, one warning remained consistent in every language: never wake them. At first, the meaning was unclear. The messages never explicitly named who they were. Some speculated it referred to an ancient, long-extinct horror. Others believed it was a metaphor for a forgotten catastrophe. Then, archaeologists uncovered something chilling: a star map. At its center, highlighted in every alien civilization's records, was a single world: Earth. And humanity was still very much awake. Chapter 1. The First Warning. Dr. Alara Voss had spent her career decoding the voices of the dead. Alien civilizations, long lost to the ravages of time, had left their stories etched in stone, carved in metal, or encoded in light. Some were mere remnants of forgotten poetry, others desperate cries for help never answered. But nothing had ever unsettled her like this. "Captain Kessler," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." The bridge of the Sovereign Dawn was a study in controlled chaos, a dozen officers managing the ship's trajectory through the ancient wreckage of what had once been a thriving alien station. Captain Dane Kessler strode across the command deck with practiced ease, his sharp blue eyes narrowing as he approached her terminal. "What is it, Doctor?" he asked. She turned the display towards him. The glyphs were crude but unmistakable, scratched into the remains of a console that had survived whatever catastrophe had wiped out the station. They had been left there with desperate intent, repeated over and over in different dialects, spanning thousands of years of linguistic drift. "Never wake them," Kessler exhaled, studying the warning. "Them? Who are they?" Alara shook her head. "I don't know yet. But this phrase, it's been repeated across multiple ruins. I checked our database. This isn't the first time we've encountered it." He frowned. "Explain." "Ruins from completely different species, from different parts of the galaxy, even separated by millennia. They all contain warnings about Earth. Not just about us, but about something on Earth. Something sleeping." The weight of her words settled like a leaden hand on his chest. Humanity had ventured into the stars expecting to find itself alone, or at worst, surrounded by civilizations more advanced, indifferent, or extinct. What they hadn't expected was this: a whispering dread spread across the cosmos, bound by a single warning. "Keep digging," Kessler ordered. "I want to know exactly what they were afraid of." Alara nodded, but her fingers trembled as she returned to her work. The more she deciphered, the less she wanted to know. Chapter 2. The Buried Truth. The deeper they dug into the data, the more disturbing the pattern became. Every ancient archive they accessed contained a variation of the same message. Some were etched onto derelict satellites, others coded into dying stars as desperate warnings. The oldest message they found was nearly 10 million years old. "This one is particularly troubling," said Lieutenant Oren Vasquez, the ship's xenoarchaeologist. He pulled up a hologram of a decayed alien monolith discovered in the Olithian expanse. The translation flashed before them. "We found Earth. We sent probes. They landed, but never returned. We sent more. Their signals grew strange. Then they went silent. Our ships followed. We watched from orbit. We saw them wake up. We did not understand what we had done. Our homeworld is gone. Do not wake them. Do not approach. Do not let them know you are watching." "Something woke up," Kessler muttered, "and wiped out an entire species." "Multiple species," Vasquez corrected. "We've cross-referenced other ruins. It's not just the Olithians. The Varesh, the Shtal, the Kainathic, they all had similar warnings. And those species never made it past a certain point in their expansion." Alara felt the icy tendrils of fear grip her spine. Are we sure they're talking about Earth now? What if they meant Earth in the past? Maybe whatever happened is over. Oren's face was grim. There are recent messages, Captain. Within the last 1,000 years, something has been keeping an eye on Earth. And the warnings never stopped. A cold silence settled over the bridge. The implications were staggering. If something was still there, still dormant, then every exploration mission, every human transmission sent beyond Sol had been a gamble. "We need to make a decision," Kessler said finally. "Do we investigate further, or do we heed the warning?" A heavy pause followed. Then a voice broke the silence. "I think we should wake them up." All eyes turned toward the speaker. A rogue faction of the crew had already made up their minds. And soon, the choice wouldn't be Kessler's to make it all. Chapter 3. The Fractured Past. The deep space exploration vessel Erebus floated in the vast emptiness between stars, its dark hull absorbing the distant glow of long-dead suns. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Dr. Kessler stood over the latest artifact retrieved from the derelict alien ruin, a fragment of an ancient data core, its inscriptions barely decipherable. The messages had been found on a dozen worlds, written in as many dead languages, yet all carried the same dire warning: never wake them. "The patterns are too precise to be coincidence," Kessler murmured, running a gloved hand over the artifact. These civilizations lived millennia apart. Different species, different times, yet they all left the same message. Captain Ortega leaned over the conference table, her fingers drumming against the metal surface. "We need to ask the real question. Who is them?" Lieutenant Rourke, their communications officer, hesitated before speaking. "And why does every trace of their existence seem to be wiped out after they make contact with Earth?" The ship's AI, Helios, projected a three-dimensional star map above them. Red markers blinked across the holographic display, each one denoting a civilization that had recorded the warning. Every followed an unmistakable trajectory toward Sol, toward Earth, before vanishing from history. Kessler exhaled sharply. "It's as if something systematically erased every species that got too close." The room fell silent. "We keep digging, we might be next," muttered Chief Engineer Patel. "Maybe it's time to stop." But it was already too late. As the words left his mouth, Helios interrupted with an alert. A dormant signal, one buried in cosmic background radiation for untold ages, had just activated, originating from the Sol system. A signal that had not been transmitted. A signal that had been waiting to wake up. Chapter 4. The Forbidden Signal. The bridge of the Erebus was a storm of activity. Warning lights bathed the walls in a blood-red glow, and the hum of the ship's core seemed to grow louder as the tension mounted. "Run it again," Captain Ortega ordered. The ship's AI obliged. A garbled transmission played through the speakers, static interwoven with something else. Not a voice, but something old, something vast, stirring from beneath the surface of reality itself. "It's not a normal transmission," Rourke said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a response." Dr. Kessler frowned. "Response to what?" "We didn't send anything." "No, but we've been looking," Ortega muttered. "And maybe that's enough." The Erebus's instruments flared with new readings. The signal wasn't just activating, it was spreading. Across deep space relays, subspace channels, even the ruins they had visited before. Like a long dormant pulse suddenly remembering it had something to say. The ship's AI cut in. "New data, correlation complete. Cross-referencing with known historical archives." A moment later, the star map above them shifted. The ancient warnings, the vanished civilizations, all were connected by something far older, far more terrifying than they had imagined. "Captain?" Kessler's voice wavered as she pointed to the display. "Look at this." Earth wasn't discovered by these civilizations. It was hidden, sealed. Someone, something, buried it. And now, it's waking up. Before anyone could react, the Erebus's comms array crackled to life. A second transmission had arrived. This time, there was no static. This time, the message was clear. It spoke in a language that should have been long dead, yet every soul aboard recognized it instantly. Ancient Terran. It said only 2 words. "Who's there?" Chapter 5. Into the Forbidden Zone. The The surface of Ichthos 9 was a skeletal wasteland, its once proud structures reduced to fractured towers and scorched stone. The ruins stretched endlessly, bathed in the dim light of a dying sun. Captain Dorand adjusted the settings on his visor, filtering out the swirling dust as he and his team advanced into the heart of the desolate city. Dr. Reyes knelt beside a jagged wall, running a gloved hand across the deep, scorched carvings. "More messages," she murmured. "Different dialects, but all say the same thing." Lieutenant Harlow leaned in. "Let me guess. Never wake them." Reyes nodded, swallowing hard. The phrase had haunted their expedition, etched into ruins on world after world. But here, on Ichthos 9, the warnings were not just carefully recorded historical entries. They were frantic, gouged into the very bones of the city as if by hands trembling in fear. "This world fell long before humans left Earth," said Doran, his voice barely above a whisper. "So why do these messages feel recent?" As they pressed forward, the ruins led them to an underground vault, its entrance sealed by layers of stone and alien script. Their ship's AI, Ro, guided them through decoding the mechanisms, its voice flickering oddly with interference. "Captain, the symbology used here, it's inconsistent. Some of these markings are written after the fall of Ichthos 9 by species that shouldn't have been here. It's as if the warnings were added over time, by travelers who arrived and then left in terror." The vault door groaned open. A thick, unnatural darkness yawned beyond the threshold. The air inside was stale, undisturbed for millennia, and yet something about it felt aware. A holographic recording flickered to life. An alien, long extinct, spoke in hurried, broken galactic common. "We came seeking knowledge. Instead, we found the remnants of something Earth's ancestors tried to bury. The warnings are true. Do not." The recording cut to static. Doran turned to his team. "We need to get back to the ship."
Now.
Behind them, something shifted in the darkness. Chapter 6. Echoes of the Past. Harlow jolted awake with a strangled gasp. Sweat drenched his suit, and the HUD inside his helmet was flashing warnings of elevated heart rate and neural anomalies. "Report," Doran ordered. I saw something. No, I was there. Earth, but not as we know it. It was ancient yet wrong. The sky was shattered. The oceans were black. There were things, Captain. Things that knew me." Doran exchanged uneasy glances with Reyes. The hallucinations had started ever since they left the ruins. But they weren't just random visions. They were shared, persistent, intelligent. Ro's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, I have analyzed the latest data from the ruins. I believe the warnings were not meant to keep aliens away from Earth. They were meant to keep humans from uncovering the truth." A pit formed in Doran's stomach. "And what is the truth, Ro?" "Something was sealed away. Something tied to Earth's past. But the act of reading these messages, of knowing this knowledge, is undoing the seal. Captain, it knows we have seen it." The ship's lights flickered. A deep, rumbling sound, like laughter but utterly inhuman, echoed through the corridors. Reyes backed against the bulkhead, eyes wide with horror. "We weren't supposed to come here. We weren't supposed to know." A final message appeared on the ship's console, written in languages long extinct, in words that should not have been able to reach them. "You will awaken them. Run." The engines roared to life as the ship lifted off. But as they accelerated into the void, something unseen followed, just beyond the edge of their sensors, waiting and watching. Chapter 7. The Silent Warning. Captain Idris Kale stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Valora, staring at the endless void beyond. The galactic archives had led them here, to the very edge of a long-forgotten star system, where the messages warning against Earth had originated. The unsettling messages repeated throughout history had drawn them in, but they still had no definitive answers. Behind him, Dr. Alice Venn, the ship's lead xenoarchaeologist, clutched a worn data tablet. "We're receiving a new signal," she murmured. "It's different from the others."
Kale turned.
"Different how?" "It's old. Far older than the previous ones. But this time, It's not just a warning, it's an instruction. She placed the message on the main display. The alien script had been translated by the ship's AI, forming eerie words. They do not sleep. They do not dream. They are only waiting. You must go.
Now.
A cold silence settled over the room. The crew had seen countless warnings, but this message carried an undeniable urgency. Kale exhaled sharply. We're already here. We're not leaving until we get some answers. Navigator Lauren Vex hesitated. Captain, I know how you feel about superstition, but every species we've encountered left a version of this message. We shouldn't dismiss it. Then let's confirm the danger firsthand, Kale said. Take us into the system. The Veolora's engines flared, propelling them toward the enigmatic blue planet known in ancient records as Earth. Chapter 8. The Forgotten Sentinels. The Veolora descended into orbit around Earth. The world below was eerily silent. No cities. No lights. Just sprawling ruins overtaken by time. The scans showed no signs of life, and yet, something felt undeniably wrong. Dr. Venn studied the readings. No biosigns, but there's something interfering with our deeper scans. It's like the planet itself is resisting. Let's send down a probe, Kale ordered. The metallic sphere detached from the ship, plummeting toward the planet's surface. As it descended, its feet displayed the remnants of an ancient civilization, massive structures, long abandoned, standing like silent sentinels against time. Then, abruptly, the probe's signal flickered and cut out. What the hell happened? Kale demanded. Vex's fingers danced over the controls. Unknown. It's like it just vanished. Kale made a snap decision. Prepare a landing party. We're going down. As the Veolora's shuttle touched the surface, the air felt thick, heavy with something beyond the merely physical. The ruins stretched for miles, colossal structures hinting at a civilization more advanced than any in recorded history. Dr. Venn moved cautiously, scanning the surroundings. These buildings, they weren't destroyed by war. They were abandoned. But why? Then came the first whisper. A low, indecipherable murmur, as if the wind itself carried voices. Kale raised his weapon instinctively, eyes scanning the shadows. Captain, Vex's voice trembled. We're not alone. Shadows shifted between the ruins. Figures not quite solid but not illusions either. They stood tall, watching, waiting. Ven's scanner beeped erratically. This isn't possible. Kale turned to her.
What?
These entities, they're not biological. They're not even alive in a conventional sense. They're remnants. Remnants of what? Ven swallowed. Of something that should have never been awakened. The whispers grew louder. The ground trembled. The ruins seemed to pulse with unseen energy. A final message flashed on Ven's device, as if sent from something deep beneath the surface. You were warned. Now it's too late. Chapter 9. Echoes of the Forgotten. The darkness pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating. Dr. Eleanor Grayson steadied her breath as she descended deeper into the ruins beneath Antarctica. The expedition's findings had already shaken the world. Ancient carvings, hidden tunnels, and messages that repeated in every language known to mankind. Never wake them. But who were they? And why did these messages stretch across civilizations separated by millennia? The team had uncovered something deeper, older, and far more disturbing than they'd ever imagined. What started as an archaeological mission had transformed into a desperate search for the truth before it was too late. Eleanor's boots crunched against frost-covered stone. The luminescent carvings on the walls pulsed with a faint glow, as if responding to her presence. Dr. Samuel Harris, her closest colleague, followed just behind. His breath was ragged, his gloved hands trembling slightly. I don't like this, Ellie, he whispered, eyes darting toward the unnatural symbols. We should have never come this far. She didn't respond. Her mind was too fixated on the monolithic doorway ahead. Unlike the other chambers, which were riddled with warnings, this one bore a single statement. The time is broken. The sleepers stir. With a glance at Sam, she pressed forward, heart pounding. The door groaned as it shifted open, revealing an enormous chamber filled with massive, coffin-like structures, each pulsating with a dim, rhythmic glow. The air was thick, charged with energy that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Then one of them moved. A sound echoed, a whisper? A growl? So faint it could have been in her head. But the sensation that followed was undeniable. Something was waking up. Chapter 10. The Unseen Ones. The chamber trembled. Dust and ice fell in tiny cascades from the ceiling as the vibrations grew stronger. The team, frozen in horror, could only watch as the ancient sarcophagi, if that's what they were, shuddered with the force of something within. Eleanor, Sam's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "We need to go."
Now?
She didn't move. Her scientific curiosity warred with primal terror. The carvings hadn't just been warnings, they had been desperate pleas. A deep, guttural noise rolled through the cavern. The lids of the first two structures slid open, revealing an abyss of darkness inside. No bodies. No bones. Just voids that seemed to swallow the light itself. And then the shadows moved. A tendril of inky blackness slithered over the edge of the nearest coffin. It wasn't a physical thing. It flickered like smoke, yet it carried weight, dragging itself forward. Where it touched, the stone withered, crumbling to dust. Eleanor stumbled back. Her radio crackled with static before a voice, garbled and distant, hissed through. "You were warned." Sam grabbed her wrist. "Ellie, listen to me. We have to seal this place. If these things get out..." Too late. The darkness coiled, shifting, stretching into something humanoid, its form indistinct, yet the presence behind it was crushing, ancient, hungry. Eleanor's breath hitched. The truth was undeniable now. They weren't alone, and they had just become part of a prophecy carved into stone thousands of years ago. A prophecy that had just begun. Chapter 11. The Echoes of the Forgotten. The air inside the cavern was thick, suffocating with the weight of ages past. Carter wiped sweat from his brow as he gazed at the massive stone slabs, each etched with the same ominous phrase in languages spanning across millennia. "Never wake them." "Who the hell are they?" Ren muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Vance ran her fingers over the inscriptions. "These warnings are older than any civilization we've known. Yet they all say the same thing. That isn't coincidence. Then why is no one asking the real question?" Miller, the team's geologist, cut in. "Who wrote them? And why here?" Silence stretched as they turned their eyes toward the heart of the chamber. Beyond the warning stones lay an abyss, a gaping wound in the earth's crust, surrounded by monolithic structures that seemed neither natural nor crafted by human hands. Carter checked his scanner, the screen flickering wildly. "I'm getting readings biological, but they're ancient, beyond carbon dating. And they're moving." Ren's grip tightened on her rifle. "So we woke something up?" A deep tremor rumbled beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling. The walls shuddered as a low, guttural sound emerged from the pit. Then a voice. Not human. Not mechanical. Something in between. "You should not be here." The team's radios crackled. Static hissed through their earpieces, distorting the already alien voice. Dr. Vance took a step back. It's aware of us." The ground beneath them convulsed violently, and the abyss yawned wider. Something was rising. Something vast. Chapter 12. Awakening the Nameless. Panic set in. The tremors escalated, knocking the team to their knees. Ren gritted her teeth, eyes locked on the abyss. A shape coalesced in the darkness, massive, amorphous, shifting like liquid shadow. A deep hum resonated through their bones. The monolithic structures pulsed with a sickly green light, illuminating glyphs they hadn't seen before. They weren't warnings anymore. They were instructions. "It's trying to communicate," Dr. Vance breathed. "But not with us, with something deeper, older." Carter struggled to his feet, activating his beacon. "HQ, we have a situation. Immediate evac required." Static. The entity in the pit shifted. It had no definite form, only the suggestion of something immense, something unfathomable, a presence and intelligence. Then a whisper, no, countless whispers overlapping. You have forgotten us. You were meant to sleep, as we did. The team exchanged glances. Miller shook his head. What does that mean? The whispers grew louder, the voice twisting, taking shape. You are not as you were. You have changed. And you will wake the others. A tendril of shadow shot forth from the pit. Ren fired instinctively. The bullet phased through as if the darkness wasn't truly there. Then it struck Carter. His scream was brief. His body convulsed, and his eyes were no longer his. A deep, infinite blackness replaced them as his face twisted in an expression of something between terror and enlightenment. We should have never come here, Dr. Vance choked out. Carter turned to them, and he spoke in a voice that was no longer his own. It is too late. You have woken them all. Chapter 13. Beneath the Surface. The descent was suffocating. Dr. Alara Voss tightened her grip on the harness as the deep-sea submersible plunged into the abyssal darkness. The ocean swallowed them whole, the last glimmers of sunlight vanishing above. Beside her, Captain Doran checked the pressure readings, his expression unreadable beneath the dim glow of the control panel. We're approaching the coordinates, Doran murmured. Alara exhaled. The transmissions had been erratic, but consistent. A distress signal in a language older than any known civilization, repeating the same warning. Never wake them. As the sonar mapped the ocean floor, a colossal structure emerged through the murky depths. It wasn't natural. Monolithic towers, entwined with deep-sea flora, jutted from the sediment like the fingers of a buried titan. That's not a ruin, whispered Sato, the team's marine biologist. That's a city. The submersible hovered just above the alien spires. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, similar to the inscriptions found in the Antarctic caves months ago. Those had been warnings. These seemed different. A call? A low vibration pulsed through the water. The monitors flickered. Something's moving down there, Doran said. Alara's pulse spiked. The darkness below them churned. And then they saw it. A shape, massive and coiling, slid between the towering ruins. Not fish. Not whale. Something older. Something waiting. And they had woken it. Chapter 14. The Awakening. The submersible shook violently. Alarms blared. We need to ascend.
Now.
Doran yelled, slamming the controls. But the vessel wasn't responding. Alara watched in horror as tendrils of bioluminescent energy rippled along the ancient structures. The symbols, no longer just inscriptions, began to shift and glow, rearranging themselves like a vast, living puzzle. It's rewriting itself, Sato gasped. It's alive. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the water, reverberating through their skulls. The monitors scrambled into static. Something was reaching into their systems, speaking through them. The distorted voices of long-dead beings whispered through the radio. You should not have come. A shadow eclipsed the submersible. Something vast unfurled from the ruins, its form only barely comprehensible. Limbs too many, eyes too old, a body of liquid shadow and bone. It had been sleeping. For how long, no one knew. But now it was awake. Doran struggled with the controls. If we don't get out now... The vessel lurched. The entity coiled around them, studying, deciding. The ocean trembled. Then, a voice not from the radio, but inside their minds, returned to the surface. Tell them, never wake us again. The grip released. The submersible shot upward, expelled from the abyss like a discarded stone. As they breached the surface, gasping, the water below turned eerily still. The warnings had been clear, but had they come too late? Chapter 15. Beneath the Frozen Ruins. The icy wind howled through the shattered remains of the research station as Dr. Elias Carter adjusted his thermal visor. The transmission they had intercepted from deep beneath the ice was no anomaly. It was a warning. He felt it in his bones. Something ancient slumbered beneath them, something that should never be disturbed. We shouldn't be here, murmured Dr. Aisha Patel, her breath visible in the frigid air. She clutched her tablet, the translated messages flashing in red across the screen. Every message we've found in these ruins, Elias. Every civilization that came before us, they all said the same thing. Never wake them. Elias exhaled sharply. The expedition had started as a simple archaeological dig, uncovering remnants of a lost extraterrestrial presence on Earth. But the deeper they dug, the more they realized they were not alone. The ruins beneath the Antarctic ice held secrets predating human civilization, messages from species long extinct. "We've come too far to turn back now," Elias said, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. "The last chamber is just ahead. We need to know what happened here." A low hum vibrated through the ground beneath them. The ice cracked in response, sending a sharp echo through the tunnel. Aisha shot Elias a look, fear glimmering in her eyes. Their team had already lost 2 members to inexplicable accidents. They weren't willing to lose more. As they descended into the final chamber, the walls pulsed with an eerie, bioluminescent glow. The inscriptions covering every surface weren't just warnings, they were prayers. Pleas from civilizations long forgotten. "Oh my God," Aisha whispered. She pointed toward the center of the room, where a massive, obsidian obelisk loomed. "Elias, look." The obelisk surface shifted, responding to their presence. The symbols on it rearranged themselves, forming words they could understand. "They are not dead. They dream. And they hunger." A guttural rumble filled the chamber, vibrating through their bones. The obelisk cracked open, revealing an abyss darker than anything Elias had ever seen. A force pulled at them, an invisible pressure suffocating the air itself. "Run!" Elias shouted, but it was too late. Something had awakened. Chapter 16. The Sleeper Stirs. Aisha screamed as the darkness poured from the obelisk, coalescing into shifting, amorphous shapes. Eyes, too many of them, blinked open within the void, staring at them with an intelligence that was not human. Elias grabbed Aisha's wrist and yanked her backward just as a tendril of shadow lashed out, narrowly missing her face. Their boots slipped on the ice as they sprinted toward the exit. The tunnel behind them collapsed, swallowed by the same abyss that had spilled from the obelisk. "We need to seal it," Aisha gasped, fumbling for the detonator on her belt. The charges were set along the tunnel walls in case of emergency, but would they even be enough? Elias turned to look back, just for a second.
It was a mistake. The void had shape now.
Something massive stirred within, shifting as if breaking free from unseen chains. The words on the walls burned brighter, screaming their warnings into his mind. "Do not look. Do not speak. Do not wake them." But they already had. The ground buckled. The station above them groaned as the pressure of something impossibly vast pushed against reality itself. The weight of the entity's presence was suffocating, as though existence itself bent to its will. "Aisha, now!" Elias roared. She slammed the detonator's button. Explosions rocked the chamber as the tunnel behind them collapsed, sealing the darkness behind tons of ice and rock. The air stilled. For a moment, there was silence. Then the whispers began. They came from everywhere and nowhere, slithering into their ears like tendrils of thought that did not belong to them. The entity was still awake, and it was speaking to them. Elias turned to Aisha, his voice barely a whisper. "We didn't stop it. We just slowed it down." Aisha's hands trembled as she pulled up the last message on her tablet. The final words of the last civilization that had tried to contain it. "It knows you now. It will never let you go." The lights in the tunnel flickered. And then the darkness moved. Chapter 17. Beneath the Surface. Dr. Elias Corwin stood in the underground vault, the weight of centuries pressing down on his shoulders. The walls of the chamber hummed faintly, pulsating with an energy that defied every known scientific principle. Around him, the team of archaeologists and linguists carefully examined the massive obsidian slabs covered in intricate carvings. The warnings had been clear. Every fragment of text, every ancient script, had delivered the same chilling message. Never wake them. "Elias," Dr. Miriam Voss called, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I found something." She gestured toward a section of the wall where a deep, spiral-shaped carving pulsed with an eerie glow. Elias approached cautiously. "What is it?" "A name, I think," she said, running her fingers over the inscriptions. Not a warning this time. A name buried beneath all the others. A name that... A sudden tremor shook the chamber, cutting her off. The ground beneath them groaned, and dust cascaded from the ceiling as if the earth itself was gasping for air. A low, rhythmic thudding began, almost imperceptible at first, but growing louder with every second. "We need to leave," Elias said, his voice tight. But it was too late. A deep, guttural noise echoed from the darkness of the adjoining tunnel. It was not the sound of shifting earth. It was something alive. Miriam backed away, her face pale. "Elias, what did we just wake up?" Chapter 18. The Hollow Ones. Panic surged through the team as the sound swelled, filling the chamber with an almost unbearable pressure. It wasn't just noise. It was a presence, a force pressing against their minds like an unseen hand. Dr. Arun Patel clutched his head. "They're speaking," he gasped. "They're..." His voice cut off as blood began to trickle from his nose. Elias grabbed Miriam's arm. "We have to go, now." The team turned to flee, but the tunnel leading back to the surface was no longer a path. The walls had shifted, the stone rearranging itself like living flesh, sealing them in. The carvings glowed brighter, and suddenly, the script changed. The letters twisted, forming new words. "You should not have looked." A figure moved in the darkness ahead, humanoid but grotesquely elongated, its limbs stretching unnaturally. Its skin was black, reflecting no light, yet its eyes, empty voids, swallowed all color, all sanity. Dr. Patel collapsed, convulsing, his body writhing as if unseen hands pulled at his flesh. The creature raised one skeletal finger, and Patel's body split apart, dissolving into an ink-like substance that slithered toward the others. Miriam screamed. Elias yanked her away, forcing the team toward another exit. But there was no exit. The walls continued to shift, the tunnel warping into impossible angles. Then the voice spoke. Not aloud, but inside their skulls. "We were never meant to wake." Miriam's breath came in ragged gasps. "Elias, this isn't a tomb." He turned to her, desperate. "Then what is it?" She swallowed hard, eyes locked on the darkness, where more figures stirred. A prison? Chapter 19. The Silent Chamber. The air inside the chamber was thick with an unnatural stillness. Lieutenant Carter ran his fingers over the inscriptions lining the walls, words carved with precision beyond human craftsmanship. His team had been deciphering the messages for weeks, each warning growing increasingly dire. "Do not wake them." But wake whom? Dr. Evelyn Marsh adjusted her glasses, her pulse steady despite the weight of history pressing down on them. The phrase repeats itself in dozens of dialects, from languages lost to time. Something or someone made sure this message endured. Sergeant Daniels aimed his flashlight into the far recesses of the chamber, illuminating what appeared to be a sarcophagus, except it was not made of stone or metal. The material was unknown, its surface pulsating faintly as if alive. Carter exhaled sharply. "We need to report this. We don't touch anything until we understand what we're dealing with." Dr. Marsh hesitated, biting her lip. "There's something else. Look at these glyphs." She traced a set of symbols that had been deliberately scratched out. Someone tried to erase a portion of the warning. It's possible that... A sudden tremor cut her off. The ground beneath them shifted, sending dust spiraling from the ceiling. The sarcophagus-like object pulsed harder, its surface rippling as if sensing their presence. Then a sound, low and resonant, like a distant echo of something awakening. Daniels raised his weapon. "What the hell was that?" Carter's earpiece crackled. "Command, this is Carter. We have a..." The signal died. Static filled their comms, and the chamber's torches, long thought extinguished, flickered to life with an eerie blue glow. "We need to go," Marsh whispered, stepping back. But before she could take another step, the sarcophagus split open with a sickening crack. Something stirred within. Chapter 20. The Awakening. A shadow poured from the sarcophagus like liquid darkness, tendrils stretching outward before forming into a vaguely humanoid shape. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were voids in the fabric of reality itself. The entity regarded them, unblinking. Dr. Marsh's breath hitched as a voice filled the chamber, not spoken, but felt deep within their bones. "You should not have come." Carter tightened his grip on his rifle, though he had a sinking feeling bullets would be useless. "Who are you?" The thing tilted its head. "The question is not who, but when." Marsh swallowed.
"We don't understand."
"The messages. A warning. One your kind always ignores." The walls of the chamber trembled as the symbols burned with renewed intensity. The team's flashlights flickered wildly, distorting the shadows, making them appear to move on their own.
Daniels took a step back.
"Carter, we need to." The entity surged forward without moving, its presence now surrounding them. The air grew thin, charged with energy beyond comprehension. Images flooded their minds, visions of civilizations crumbling, worlds consumed by an unseen force, an endless cycle of awakening and destruction. Marsh collapsed to her knees. They weren't warnings. They were instructions. To keep you asleep. The entity loomed closer. And now it begins again. A deafening roar erupted from deep within the earth. Cracks splintered through the chamber as the ancient mechanism that had kept this being contained finally failed. Carter grabbed Marsh and Daniels. "Move." The three of them sprinted toward the entrance, but the doorway was no longer there. Only darkness stretching endlessly in every direction. Then the world shifted. A new reality took form around them, one where the stars above no longer belonged to Earth. And the warnings had come too late.